People with NDAs that are now expired. What secrets can you finally reveal? A friend of mine got a job at a prominent local distillery that makes an extremely popular flavored whiskey. They buy whiskey from a third-party distillery and dump flavoring syrup into it. Story 2. I worked for Equifax about 20 years ago. We were doing things with your data we weren't supposed to do. Story 3. I worked for a company that did screen printing and engraving, and one of their biggest clients was the US military. They bought everything from China. They had a person who would cut out the Made in China tags and replace them with Made in USA tags. Story 4. A guy I know was on cash cab. A lot of it was faked. He was told he would be on a travel food show and would get picked up by a fake taxi at a certain location at a certain time. There were camera crews outside the taxi, and there's no way on earth you might mistake it for a real cab. Story 5. I was a contracted translator for the US military. I also translated Marvel comic books. Marvel had tighter security. Story 6. Mini Cooper/BMW replaced our car because the high-pressure fuel pump failed 6 times within 6 months. However, the recorded reason for the replacement of the car was because of a stained interior from dirty mechanic hands, so it wasn't replaced via the lemon law. Story 7. When a pharmacy's stock of medication expires, they can't just throw it away, so they hire pharmaceutical waste disposal companies to take it away and dispose of it properly. The pharmacy I worked for bought expired medication and supplies under the table from one of these disposal companies and resold them at full price. Hopefully this pharmacy got caught, as it's not only illegal but potentially dangerous. If I was OP, I would have reported it appropriately. Story 8. In 1990, I signed an NDA at Chili's when they showed me how to make their new Awesome Blossom. No other restaurant in town had anything like it, and it was hugely popular at the time. Story 9. Kraft Macaroni and Cheese is coming out with a more modern and upscale version to expand its market from lower-income folks to higher-income folks. It is almost entirely the same product as the 69-cent blue box, but will have a lighter, less orangey color. They will be sold as shells and not macaroni, and the box will be shaped differently. It will go for about $2 more. It's expected to be released by 1995. That is the funny thing about NDAs. Usually they expire whenever the information is no longer relevant to the public. Thanks OP for the super late heads up. Story 10. I worked for a native casino. The golf courses lost a ton of money for us, as did the advertising for the courses. The food we generally broke even on because of all the comps we'd give out. If a crime was committed by a dealer, they would watch the dealer for 3 months to see if there were accomplices. They used facial recognition and would pair match you, so if the same person sat with the same dealer over and over, they would know. This way they could look for accomplices, and when they busted you, they would sit you down and make you watch a video of you breaking the law. They did this because they wanted you to plead guilty, as opposed to an expensive trial. Story 11. I worked for a company that audited medical bills and looked for stuff that wasn't charged. If you were not billed for something, they would try to collect on it and get a share of that. If you were billed for something and should not have been, well, sucks to be you, moving on with no refunds. Story 12. I was working at a hospital as an intern, and there was a woman who had a brain tumor a while back. She came in for a checkup 6 months pregnant and had depression. The doctor thought he found a new tumor, so she had another brain operation, except there was no new tumor and they cut her head open for nothing. After she woke up, they didn't tell her this, and instead acted like they removed it successfully. Story 13. Dell closed all of their in-person kiosk locations so they could get the money to fire the CEO. No one bothered to vet his contract, which allowed him to adjust his own pay rate to whatever he decided. He also set it to where he could only be fired by giving him a $40 million golden parachute bonus. They had no choice. It was either come up with 40 million to fire him or go completely bankrupt. So yeah, Dell was almost bankrupted due to a pirate CEO. Story 14. I signed an NDA to waitress at a local family-owned restaurant. The owner was nuts, definitely had a severe personality disorder, and was worried about his recipes getting leaked. The restaurant is dead now, and his secret recipes consisted almost solely of frozen packaged food. Edit. Stop trying to guess what restaurant it is. You never will. There are millions of family-owned places with crazy bosses that go under. You don't know the place, and I'm not going to tell you. Also, Mr. Krabs pays his employees enough to own houses and pets. I wish I worked for him. Personal bias can be big in small business owners. There's more to running a business or restaurant than the ideas or recipes you use. Story 15. Google doesn't hire direct support employees. They open small projects in the US and hire up to 250 contract employees of varying support positions for the project. Once they get the stats needed to run everything efficiently, they have mass layoffs and outsource their jobs to a country such as the Philippines or India that's willing to accept much less than their US counterpart. At the same time, Google rakes in a huge tax cut because they're creating jobs in the local communities. Story 16. I worked for a company that audited medical bills and looked for stuff that wasn't charged. If you were not billed for something, they would try to collect on it and get a share of that. If you were billed for something and should not have been, well, sucks to be you. They're moving on with no refunds. Story 17. I had to sign an NDA for a secure shipment that came into a building where I ran security at. The shipment came in at 2 a.m. in an unmarked transit van. 2 guys had to verify their biometrics and give me the correct password. Then we were required to deactivate the cameras on the floors along the travel routes they took inside the building, as well as wipe the footage of them entering and leaving. They were long play videotapes, so it was easy to just say the tape got chewed. They unpacked a set of vases and trundled off to put them into a private vault. I don't know what was in them, but I've seen less security for pallets of precious metal bullion. Story 18. I worked at a matchmaking company. It was all bullcrap. It was basically just throwing darts at a wall until something stuck. There was no science or magic to it at all. Edit. I didn't work for an internet matching company, so they may have a different process. What we did was get a paid client and set them up on dates. The dates we found were from a pool of women, and we would just keep picking one after another. I quit because I felt like the women were just being used, and I became uncomfortable profiting off of people's hopes. They very much play up on finding you true love, and that it's a process. They'll very much play up the fairy tale romance. It did change me. I don't really date anymore because I don't trust the true intentions of people anymore. I became very jaded about dating after all of that. I don't know if you could even properly predict love. Even with today's most complex algorithms, random chance would probably be just as effective, if not more. Story 19. One of my friend's brothers was on the MTV show Room Raiders. Everything in the show is staged. All of the items that they would find were planted. At the end of the show, the prize was not a date with the girl that he picked. He just got her phone number. Story 20. It was my first job out of college. I was working for a major private jet company. I had to keep secret their next new planes while working on ads for them. Very fun time, and it was awesome being in the in crowd. Story 21. Amazon made me sign one when I worked with a company that painted their airplanes before the public knew they had them. I did the FAA paperwork. I was only one of 7 people to see their airplane fully purple with their logo on it. I was actually taken off of the project for a day because they thought I lied about not having a Facebook. They meant business. Story 22. You could get free satellite TV without any hacking or hardware mods. All you had to do was call up your Dish or DirecTV phone line and add everything you wanted to get. Then you'd wait until it all appears on your account, and you can watch it. Unplug all the hardware in your system, and give them a call back saying it wasn't you, or you changed your mind, or you only had it for visiting family or whatever. Take it back down to the bare minimum, or turn it off completely. After waiting at least 24 hours, plug it back in and continue to enjoy everything. This has been known to work for years for a lot of people. Satellite TV is one-way communication, so the only way they could update your programming authorization was to send a signal to your specific hardware. Sending satellite signals to a single customer is expensive, so they don't keep doing it. When your system got the update to turn on all the channels, it stuck until you made a change. All you had to do was skip that downgrade signal. Story 23. I worked for Heartland Dental. You have probably been to a Heartland Dental office, but you wouldn't know it because all of their offices have different names, like Montvale Dental, or the Dental Group. They do this so that when one of the offices gets caught in a scandal, which happens often, the whole company doesn't get affected. They take dentists that either just came out of dental school and don't have enough money to start up their own office, or they're dentists that have a bad reputation, so they relocate them into one of their offices. These dentists work on commission and bonuses, so we would get monthly numbers we would have to hit. The biggest moneymaker in dentistry is crowns, because insurance pays us the most for them. We would have to sometimes hit 100 crowns in a month. It's rare that we actually saw that many patients that needed crowns, so let's say you needed a filling or you had an existing crown. The dentist would say, instead of that $125 filling, you need a $1,500 crown. If you had an existing crown, our dentists would say there was decay under it and it needed to be replaced. I heard corporate representatives urge our doctors to do this. One of the worst companies I've ever worked for. Story 24. I worked for a company that built hip implants. Some of them were custom and made to order based on CAT scans. The quality of the modeling was dubious, and we had several fabs where the implant bent in the patient. The company always blamed the patient for putting on too much weight. The company was also paying back physicians for ordering their custom implants, which were obviously more expensive than the standard ones that are paid by insurance. I quit the week I found this out. I only knew the bare minimum of one case. This activity led to a legal case of fraud and other stuff. Doctors and administrators of the company went to jail or were fined. Somewhere in that process, I signed multiple NDAs with a health agency covering lack of oversight and relevant communications. This was a mess on all levels: graft, corruption, material choices, medical controls. No one died, but the medical quality of services I was involved in was severely affected, and decades later it still bothers me. Lesson learned. Keep an eye on the regulatory aspects of your businesses. Story 25. A huge part of The Bachelorette was scripted. The company I worked for at the time was a major tourism service provider and featured prominently in one of the seasons. We were all pulled into meetings with the higher-up managers and given a talk about what was in our best interest, and that spilling any secrets was punishable by a $5 million lawsuit. Please sign here. I didn't care about the show. I just wanted to do my job. The Bachelorette herself was clearly there to further her public profile or acting career. The scenes were always set up before filming. Behind the camera, nothing was happening. The cast was told where to go, what to do, and how to do it. I'd say half of those guys were on their phones texting their real girlfriends most of the time. Edit. The NDA was only that we wouldn't spill secrets about the show before episodes involving our company aired. We were also not allowed to disparage the company, which honestly was easy to abide by since we were treated well, and we had excellent managers. The Bachelorette has since gone on to a fairly successful TV career, hosting several shows. All of her official press credits include The Bachelorette and her exposure during another elimination-style reality TV show, launching her career. Story 26. I signed an NDA when I worked as a fit model for Katy Perry's shoe line. A fit model is used for their good proportions to test out the fit of garments. I'm a solid size 7.5, so hooray for being average. I was hired on 2 occasions and got to hang out and give her my opinion on the fit, feeling, and comfort of different shoes. I didn't think she'd actually be there, but both times she was present and totally running the show. She was a super nice woman in person and remembered me when we met again. Also, she apologized for making me wait so long, which I thought was nice. It was a late-night meeting, as she'd just wrapped shooting a music video. Her dog is really cute too, and I got to save it when it got stuck behind a wall panel. Story 27. When I was in high school, this kid kept bragging about joining the Russian mob. He was kind of an awful person who sold drugs, way more than just pot. No one really believed him, but one day he disappeared off the face of the earth. This was a while ago, so no Facebook and no proliferation of cell phones. One day, he was just gone from our lives. Turns out somewhere up the chain of drug dealer scum, this kid really did have connections to the Russian mob. They offered to let him in and told him he'd make tons of money. People would respect and fear him, and that girls would be all over him, whatever he wanted. All they wanted from him was to show his loyalty by doing a hit. He was 17 and killed some rival drug dealer or something stupid like that. The Russians set him up and let him take the fall. This was over 20 years ago, but he is still in prison and will never leave. That was just one day in the lives of the people that idiot looked up to. I didn't breach an NDA, but I think 20 years later the Russian mob probably isn't going to kill me for talking on Reddit, so it kinda fits. Story 28. When I worked for state IT, we weren't supposed to provide details of what hardware was being used or the operating systems. In the 90s, I took on an old server, souped it up, and put Linux on it to run our networks. This was pretty radical at the time because everyone else was using something proprietary, and I was able to deliver services for free that they would have been paying out the nose for. The NDA wasn't about security. It was about keeping how much money they were wasting under wraps. Story 29. I was a model for a few big, well-known makeup companies. I did several print ads for magazines and a few television commercials. The makeup artists do use the product advertised, but very minimally. Like that mascara they're touting, it's over really good fake eyelashes, and they also used another brand of mascara along with the one they're trying to sell you. Also, the clothes in the ads you see are pinned to high heaven on the model. They fit nothing like they look. It's not you. It's not your body. It's fake advertising. Most of us models look just like you, wearing that crap without all the pins and tucks and double-sided tape. I'm sure there's many more practices such as this one that the beauty industry uses to create unrealistic standards. It's a whole lot easier to sell products if the standard is so high, it's impossible to reach without deception. Story 30. I worked for a short time as a QA tester at EA and wasn't allowed to talk about the game I was testing, which was the console port for The Sims 4. There wasn't really much to talk about, but since the first few versions were basically just running the PC version on a console, there were a lot of bugs with it. One of the worst was a lighting bug we started referring to as disco mode, since it caused a bunch of multicolored squares to show up on everything at night or in dark areas. Story 31. I've worked with many ISPs, and in the past one, I'm still under NDA for, but I can talk about the other ones. The equipment replacement fee? Divide it by 3. That's how much we paid for the box VS, and how much we are going to charge you. If you're having an issue, or something is broken and you want more money, just escalate the issue about twice for maximum return. Don't go past the supervisor's supervisor, however, because while there may be a level above them still within the call center, If you hit corporate, be prepared because they are not required to be nice. As an example of the above, there was an angry lady who was out of service for about 6 hours. She was not happy with our get-off-our-phone offer and escalated again. By doing so, she passed on about $65 worth of credits and a going-forward discount on her total bill that would save her about $7 a month. That was not good enough. She escalated past us, and the word came back via email that her credit for time out of service was instead calculated down to the minute, meaning instead of $65, her new offer was now $1.12 and no discount off the monthly bill. I was told to inform her we would take advantage of our service policy and cancel her account if she attempted to escalate again. Story 32. My dad did some top-secret contract work for the DoD back in the 1960s, and he signed a lifelong NDA as part of that job. He's dead now, so I guess it's safe to talk about it. The thing is, he never did break the NDA in any context. The strange part was that the NDA specifically prohibited him from using certain words ever again. The trouble is, some of the words are common vocabulary, and it became obvious over the years which words he did not use. Words I know he could not say, because he would find other ways of saying them, instead included ball, balloon, briefcase, bomb, and nuclear. It would have made more sense for him to just say, "There's a balloon," instead of "There's an inflatable latex object." But you gotta do what you gotta do. Eventually, he did gradually stop avoiding those words for the most part, although he would not discuss the NDA. Story 33. I'm not really sure if what I saw was declassified or expired, so I can't give specifics. I participated in arming and training some militia groups in Iraq to fight ISIS that had highly questionable motives and very little vetting done on them. I'm pretty sure that if we didn't need the cannon fodder for the siege of Mosul, that we would probably be bombing and drone striking some of the groups that we were busy passing out guns to. Also, I once had an IED dog alert on a truck that had a highly concerning amount of brain matter on it. I mean, yeah, any amount would be suspect, but there were like 5 or 6 people's worth of brains there. I've seen heads pop and know how much brains get around, and there was a lot more than that present. We had dragged him from the vehicle and were preparing to conduct a more thorough search. We were ordered via radio to stand down and let the guy, who was eerily cheerful about driving a truck plastered from bed to hood in human brain matter, continue on his way. He gave me a pack of smokes, smiled, and said he took no offense to our search and understood how troubling the situation must appear, that he felt that we were welcome guests in his country, and that he hoped we had a nice day, then drove off. Story 34. A certain global conferencing company still saves passwords for their web products in plain text. Any employee that works there can see the password. My password there was, "Not my pass, you idiot," because I knew other people would see it eventually, and they'd even comment or laugh about it. Also, we once discovered that our main conferencing software was letting you sign in regardless of the password you entered, meaning you could sign in with any email address. Once we brought it up, we first were immediately stonewalled and told not to say anything about it in written format. They had the dev team and legal on a conference call, and they decided it was best to just keep it quiet until they fixed it later that day. No client was to be notified of the issue, and the ones that knew of it were basically given the runaround until they gave up. They also added call spoofing to the software. They called it something fancier, but it was call spoofing. You could make a call and make it appear from any number you wanted. My team raised this concern many times, but were countered with, "No one will actually use it for that. That place was a goldmine of security risks." Story 35. I did some work on the trading floor at Goldman Sachs, and I had access to all of the trading accounts and transactions. I came across some shady-looking accounts which did not meet policy. It didn't use a clearly identifiable name, and I could not find any records of creation or testing for it. I asked my supervisor if I should look into this, and he turned to me and said, "We don't ask about those accounts, just ignore them." Orders from the top. Trading account creation is a long and detailed process that requires formal approval from multiple lines of management. These accounts circumvented all that and were basically anonymous with no trace. They were also trading high volume, and I was told to accept and ignore them. Story 36. When I was a kid, I visited the dentist for a cavity. While there, the dentist slipped while drilling my tooth and drilled a hole under my tongue. My mom saw me tense up, and my dentist said, "Oh, nicked her there a bit so you might see a little blood." I got home, and after an hour my entire neck was swollen up like a frog, and my voice was squeaky because of the air pressure. A pocket of air was pressing against my heart. Dirty air at that, because of the bacteria in my mouth. I was admitted to the hospital as a code 4, with a code 5 being dead. When my mom tried to sue the dentist for damages, he claimed I was kicking and screaming and out of control during the appointment. He even got his secretary to vouch for him and testify. It was total BS, and I even liked that dentist before this. My mom's lawyer was super pessimistic and told her just to settle and sign an NDA because she had a small chance of winning. So my mom settled, being naive and scared to take on an office full of liars. She could never disclose who the dentist was, and we've heard other horror stories throughout the years about this dentist screwing up other people's mouths. It sucks because every lawyer we've talked to since then has said we had a very strong case, and it's likely we would have won, like really won. Story 37. On the TV show House Hunters, where they are presented with 3 properties and must choose one, they've already chosen. In order to be selected to be on the show, you must already have an offer in and accepted on a property and be in closing. It's a foregone conclusion which one of the 3 properties they're going to be moving into. If you watch the show carefully for clues, you can start to figure out which one. Although they continue to fool me from time to time. For example, boxes are a clue. If they're viewing a house that's full of moving boxes where people are clearly packing, that's the house they've already bought. The other 2 properties may or may not have even been properties they considered during their search. They can simply be comps now on the market or properties chosen for some kind of contrasting appeal. The debates on the show are manufactured as well. The wife that wants a yard for the kids and the husband that wants a short commute aren't actually as invested in their opposing viewpoints as they pretend to be. Not that these issues don't matter to the home buyers at all, but the producers take some pre-existing issues and ask the home buyers to play them up as if they are more crucial or debatable than they really are. That's why you often see one of the buyers suddenly give in for no apparent reason on something they had been fighting for until the last minute. In addition to the fact that one of the properties is already a foregone conclusion, so there's really no meat to the discussion anyway. I know all of this, and I shamelessly watch House Hunters anyway. Story 38. I signed an NDA as a beta tester for Dragon Age Inquisition. It was for the post-release beta testing. It was basically fans testing new updates to find bugs before they got sent out. We were absolutely not allowed to mention anything about the content, even though it was just basic stuff like reworked combat abilities. I had to apply to get in though, so I thought it was pretty cool that I got chosen. Story 39. This was for a previous pharmacy chain that I worked for. It was always at risk of robbery for opiates, and we were taught to give the robber what they want with no questions asked. I have heard of times that pharmacists instead gave bottles with Tylenol in it instead, and other things that were reckless and dangerous due to possible retaliation when and if the robber figured out they had been duped. A new policy, an NDA, came out where specific opiates were placed in a safe with a GPS tracker and charger, so when it is removed from the radius of origin, it would issue a remote notification to a third party that tracked its location. They would work with local law enforcement to find the wanted party. Story 40. Remember that giant robot fight between the US and Japan? The US team Megabots spent 2+ years and more than $2 million prepping for a real fight. Once our 2 robots arrived in Japan, we were informed we now had to stage the fight, or otherwise they had found some loophole that would have allowed them to pull out and not allow us to use images of them. We immediately found out why. Their robot looked great, but essentially was foam covered in sheet metal, so due to pride, we weren't able to actually fight, as it would have been a bloodbath. One of the Megabots founders put a video up explaining exactly what went down on our YouTube channel once NDAs expired. The company folded anyways, and the lackluster duel was the main reason for that. Do you know how hard it was to see the response from the community when everyone on the Megabots team also felt duped? We know we let them down and couldn't do a thing about it outside trying to fight our 2 robots against each other in a real fight, which ended up being pretty cool. I'm glad we got to do that at least once, before it all came crashing down. Story 41. I did some research on small-scale agriculture in South Appalachia. As part of living with and studying the community I stayed with, I was sworn to secrecy for 5 years after submitting my research to the happenings and names of those I lived with. I saw arson of federal property and impersonating officers of the law and clergy, grand theft auto, meth cooking and moonshining, cockfights, kids getting coerced into prostitution, dogs getting shot full of rock salt for laughs. I had to sleep in a junkyard for a few nights and found dried human scalps hanging in an old bus. Someone ate rotting meat from a dumpster, and I had to hide for my life from shotgun-wielding thieves in the dead of winter. It's not all horror shows in the hills. There's good people with tightly knit communities and beauty in nature I've never seen since. But what's there is very much real and very much a danger. When I finally returned, I submitted my write-up and dropped the project at the advice of my sponsor. I'm sure there are some good people and communities in those areas, but it definitely doesn't sound like the place for me. It seems like an anxiety fest that I'd like to avoid. Story 42. I've signed numerous NDAs to put inventors and programmers at ease, but honestly, there's nothing to reveal that was worthy of it. Essentially, new tech people think their idea is so valuable that everyone needs to sign NDAs, or will take their idea and make all the money they were going to make. This is a ridiculous notion. The amount of work needed to make it a success is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Only the inventor is going to care enough about it to make it happen, if it ever does. Story 43. I was in the Super Bowl halftime show as one of the extras when it came to my state. Let me just say that the 2 weeks prior to the week in the stadium were fine. They just tried to teach a bunch of marching band kids how to take even steps for 2 weeks. The week of rehearsals in the stadium was hell. They promised to feed us, but had nothing for people with allergies or diseases like celiac or other dietary restrictions. They gave us these handheld radios so we could listen to instructions, but it ended up being 600 high school students sitting in the stands, listening to the music while they talked with the star and guests. They constantly changed what jobs we had, and no one knew what was going on. The part I was in required us to run off the stage out underneath the stadium all the way to the back gates and to the outside. This run was about a half a mile, and we practiced it 15 times a day for the entire week up until the game. The shark, yes, the one from the meme, was only there for the actual performance. The person in the suit missed all the practices, and I felt bad for them when it became a meme. Story 44. I wasn't a flood forecaster, but I did weather stuff for the government and saw the potential for a massive flood that the flood forecasters were completely ignoring. My supervisor called them into a meeting, and we showed them the data. They were so clueless that they didn't even know which watershed would potentially be affected. I literally had to make a custom map that explained it in black and white. Once reality dawned on them, they got real quiet and left the room. A major flood forecast was issued like 2 days later. It ended up costing taxpayers over $500 million, all made worse because they weren't prepared. A flood review was later done, and my help was never acknowledged. They blamed bad data and a lack of staff for not being prepared. Story 45. I worked for a university as an RA, and my contract said I had to complete a certain amount of office hours per week. Because of my class schedule, it was hard for me to complete my hours during the normal housing office hours. So my boss made a deal with me to complete contraband investigations for her, in exchange for signing off on my hours. I could use any tool I wanted to get the proof except the master keys. I usually used Facebook. A couple times I just walked past an open window or door and snapped a picture. I was good at the job, and I could typically knock out my list for the week in an hour. For reference, I lived and worked in a dry building. Every resident signed a contract saying they understood that and what the repercussions were for breaking the contract. The drinking age is 21 and 1 ounce of weed is a felony. The way it worked was she would give me a list of people suspected of violating the contract, and I had to gather evidence for an on-campus hearing. She would attend the hearings and present the evidence as something she gathered. If nothing could be found, they went back onto the list, in case I found evidence in the future. I have no idea how she generated the list. The NDA was that I was gathering the evidence, not her, and how I gained the intel. Bonus malicious compliance. The rules said I couldn't gather evidence when I used the master key. So, when I was doing my room/maintenance inspections, I made sure to use the master key to test the door lock, and would verbally and vaguely tell residents if they were being investigated and tip them off if they were being too obvious, such as playing beer pong in front of an open window is never a good idea. I also had to have educational sessions periodically through the year, in addition to social gatherings. So I tried to teach data privacy and being careful about what you post online, because you have no control over who sees it. Story 46. That Facebook is every bit as horrible as people think it is. What struck me most is the culture of silence there. You cannot talk openly about concerns of the effects of Facebook as an engineer, without vague references of it showing up in performance reviews. Perhaps people have a more comic book style evil corporation in mind, but at Facebook coercion happens with performance reviews, strict metrics chasing, and not talking about the broader implications of those metrics. Take, for example, chasing the average session length metric. For example, how long you're likely to stay on Facebook at any given time. Seems innocuous at first until you realize this is where radicalization and spread of misinformation happens. Because as it happens, what keeps people's attentions the most effectively is sensational posts and polarizing posts targeting people's outrage. Not only does this give you a skewed view of the world, but it rewards the people spreading misinformation and rage bait. It's not that Facebook inherently plans to maximize people's outrage, it's just their metrics chasing makes them the most money by finding these patterns. Then, like I said, it's awfully convenient to just stay silent and count the cash. It's the pinnacle of evil. Story 47. I'm pretty sure the company is bankrupt now since it's been almost 15 years, and the product hasn't seen the light of day. I was interviewing with a company that was working on a new design for a public toilet that was going to change everything. It consisted of the following. 1. A pair of toilets back to back. One would rotate up into the wall where it would be thoroughly cleaned, and then rotated back down so the other recently used toilet could be swung up into the wall for its turn in the washer. 2. The toilets wouldn't have the traditional water pool, but would instead have a conveyor belt that would carry the poo and whatever else back to an open pipe. clog-free. I quickly saw that this product was going nowhere, so I declined to work for them, but sent them a 2 or 3 page email about the pitfalls of the design. Some of these pitfalls include: 1. What happens when the auto-swapping toilet machine accidentally activates while someone is on it? 2. How much more expensive will this be than a regular porcelain John? 3. How hard will it be to retrofit all of the machinery and plumbing for the auto wash into existing architecture? 4. How do you intend on cleaning a conveyor belt that has been exposed to human waste, plus whatever other trash that gets put down onto the unit? 5. What will an open vent to the sewer smell like if you don't have the water separation like you do with a regular toilet? I don't even know how this idea made it to the designing phase in the first place. I guess that's what happens when you hire people that are nothing but yes, men who will go along with the CEO's opinion as long as they're getting paid. Story 48. I work at tech conferences, so I have to sign NDAs all the time. I saw the Google Chromecast before the public did. Chromebooks, phones, Apple phones, MacBooks, NVIDIA Shield, even some games like Call of Duty, Titanfall, and have sat in some meetings with the world's richest 0.01% and fundraisers with celebrities. Most of the time, it's boring. The best one I can remember was meeting Robin Williams. He was at a fundraiser for the local zoo. The biggest donor got to spend the day with just Robin in the zoo and name their new baby tiger. So I put the mic on Robin and he jumped up on stage and said, "Let's start the bidding on naming the new baby tiger. Come on, folks, think about it. How many times do you get to officially name a pussy?" If I remember correctly, the highest bidder got into a bidding war, and Robin was running around getting the crowd pumped up and laughing. The highest bid ended around $50,000. It was one of the most memorable and fun things I've ever got to do at an event that was for work, and it was with a magnificent man. Story 49. 99% of the time when you go to a car dealership's website and click the box to chat with a representative, you're actually talking to a person in an office nowhere near the dealership. Almost everything you ask already has a canned response for it. Where I worked, our entire job was to get your contact information to send to the dealership so they could contact you on their own time. Even if you asked a simple question like, "What's the mileage on this truck?" we were to say something like, "I'm having trouble getting that information. Let me get your phone number and email address, and I'll have a salesperson get back to you with the information." I got fired from there because I refused to engage with it. If someone asked a question and I knew, or could find the answer, I'd just tell them. Sometimes people just want to browse and don't want to be hounded by a salesperson to buy an overpriced crap car. Story 50. I used to work at EA back in 2013 as a QA game tester. When hired, we had to sign NDAs basically saying you wouldn't disclose info about the projects you were working on. E3 happened that year and the game I was working on, NBA Live, got announced/revealed. It was a big deal. They basically did a full reveal on it. Well, I thought it was okay to now say the game I'm working on. On my YouTube channel, I did a game commentary video where I said 2 weeks later I was working on NBA Live. That's all I said. I didn't give any insight to it, and I didn't give any details. Nothing like that. I had another video I did where I discussed my job as a game tester. I didn't give any specific details on it or anything office-related. Just kind of expressed what my day was like. Get the newest build for our game. Play it. Find bugs. Reproduce said bugs, write bug reports, check to see if other bugs were now fixed. You could Google this and get what I said. I never said anything bad or disclose information that wasn't already known. The thing I said about my job is just common sense. I feel like they were extra sensitive about it because it was the year the next-gen consoles were still in development, so we had the first dev kits and all that. A week or so later, I go to work, and my project lead told me I had to go home. On the spot. I knew what was happening, and I cried to him, and told him to be real with me. Am I being fired? He said he couldn't tell me anything. I got home and HR calls me about an hour later, telling me I broke my NDA and disclosed company secrets and information. I was baffled. I told them I never disclosed anything that wasn't already known or simple duties of my job that's in the job description of a game tester. Well, we argued back and forth, and they told me to take the video down as a sign of good faith. I knew they'd probably fire me anyway, but I loved that job, so if there was a chance I could stay, I'd take it. Well, I took it down, and 30 minutes later, they called me back and fired me. I was really bummed for a while after that. I really loved the job and the work I was doing, the people I was working with, the experience I was getting at that job. At the time, I was going to college for game design and kind of putting everything I had into that job and career path. When I got fired, it devastated me. Fast forward to today, I have a better job with the state, with good benefits, insurance, retirement, and all that good jazz. So I guess everything worked out, but I do miss that job and the people I worked with. I really enjoyed it. So moral of the story, if you sign an NDA, you're better off just keeping your mouth shut about anything related to whatever you signed on for. Story 51. I worked in the auto industry for a respected and highly ranked luxury brand. As a manager, we were taught by corporate on how to teach the employees to solicit a positive review. More importantly, on how to dissuade a negative review. We were using tactics that are beyond immoral and borderline illegal. A personal favorite was having to meet with a disgruntled customer and personally accept all the blame for whatever shortcoming, real or imagined, and tell them that the negative review will only affect the low-level employee that was in their corner the whole time. We would then offer them some freebies and excuse myself so the other employee could apologize. 99% of the time, the customer would take the employee's side and leave them a positive review. Occasionally, they called corporate to complain about me, which did absolutely nothing. They wanted those negative phone calls, as long as the actual online/mailed review was positive. Additionally, we would call people in for a free oil change, tire rotation, free floor mats, etc., and replace parts that were suspected in auto acceleration faults. They were trying to fix as many cars as possible to avoid a recall and bad publicity. In that case, it still became a big news story. The SUVs with a known defective engine that broke just outside warranty did not become a news story. Seeing people brag about their amazing car based on ratings still makes me cringe. If you use the ratings and reviews of vehicles to select a brand of car, don't. Most of them are skewed and exploited by certain manufacturers. Story 52. Many years ago, I went to a camp through a private organization, and we had an incident. That incident was under NDA. I don't know if it expires or not, but here is what happened. On the fourth and final night, we set up camp at our campsite for the night. We'd traveled up to 20 kilometers every day for the past 3 days by only hiking, cycling, or kayaking, so we were all exhausted. Normally, the people at the campsite in our group were 4 teenagers, including me, 2 outdoor instructors, and somewhere between 3 to 5 support staff. This night, we had about 8 extra people who worked for the company, who sponsored the camp, because the next day, we were to complete the journey at the boss's vacation house. Anyway, things happened, and one of the instructors ended up with really bad burns down one arm and one leg. We were in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal. The office was closed, so no landline. Someone mentioned the next morning that we should have just broken the window to get to the phone, but at the time no one thought of it. Even though we did have satellite phones, the only person who knew how to use them was a little too panicked to remember it. It ended up with one of the support staff and one of the workers driving her to the nearest hospital, which was supposed to be about 4 hours away. They did the trip in a little over an hour and a half. The instructor in question is fine now and has one minor scar on her hand, no bigger than a penny, to show for the ordeal. but the company that did the camps made sure we were all under NDAs because it was bad publicity. OP has left plenty of questions to be asked in their response. If you're going to post on a thread about revealing NDAs, might as well spill all the tea and not leave some things out. Story 53. I used to work for a company in the Middle East that provided relocation services to people in America. We represented 3 main companies under 9 different names, which changed every so often when the reviews got really bad. We had receptionists whose main task, aside from damage control, was to write a few extremely positive reviews for each company every single day in order to counter all the negative ones. I worked in sales. Our job was to catalog everything our clients wanted to move and then provide the best possible price while lying through our teeth about the service itself. We promised professional movers who had all the necessary training and tools for the job, great prices, quick deliveries, you name it. On moving day, the movers who showed up were often in unmarked trucks or ones with completely different names and branding on them. The workers were often immigrants who were paid under the table and had no experience whatsoever. The deliveries themselves often took a long time, and items were often lost, as multiple moves would be stacked into one truck without much labeling of items or categorizing in general. As mentioned earlier, we changed company names fairly often as the negative reviews and bad press stacked up. Moving is a toxic business, and people will always try to undermine and cheat. This is something you should never cheap out on, as the money is well worth the comfort of knowing your move is in good hands. If you are moving, I recommend finding a company that is local if possible, so that you can meet the people who represent it and see that their business is legitimate. More importantly, they will be able to send someone to survey your belongings and give a more realistic quote and time estimate. Even if it costs much more than the quotes you receive online or from salesmen, it is well worth the peace of mind on an already stressful venture. Story 54. During my geology PhD, I visited the site of a proposed waste disposal site. A preliminary geophysical survey identified a strange anomaly, a deep linear feature trending to the south-southwest. It looked like a buried river valley. The site needed investigating for an environmental impact statement and report, which was part of the planning application. My access to the site and investigation included a NDA. I couldn't publish anything about it until after the rubbish dump was built and a 5-year stay was put on my thesis. Access was restricted to only a few people. My PhD supervisor also thought the anomaly was an ancient buried river valley, perhaps a few million years old. This is exactly what the people who wanted to build the rubbish dump wanted to hear, as they absolutely could not put a rubbish dump over or near a karst feature, dissolved limestone. Contamination could leak into the groundwater. We drilled into the center of the anomaly in 2003, and we encountered peat and gravels, then 40 meters of clay lake sediments, then some more gravels, but then we found 65 meters of hard clay. The hard clays were left behind after the limestone dissolved. It was karst, a type of karst called a pocket deposit. They were also found in the UK, and the clays were used to make pipes and cheap pottery. They were around 15 million years old, judging by the fossil pollen and leaves they found. By the time the stay ended, the rubbish dump was built close to the anomaly where it should not be. Story 55. I worked in the pharmaceutical supply industry from. We are a Canadian company, and in the warehouse stock everything from over-the-counter meds to narcotics and controlled medications. I worked in customer service, and my shifts were days. My uncle, who got me the job, was a night supervisor in the warehouse. 4 black SUVs with garbage bags over their plates pulled into the parking lot and banged on the door. The staff inside ran to the cameras, and in the meantime, these guys had bashed through 2 metal doors into the warehouse, now only blocked by a locked gate. A man pointed a rifle through the gate and instructed my uncle to unlock the gate and let them into the warehouse, or they would shoot through the gate at the staff, so he opened it. They came in, 12 guys total, and pinned everyone to the floor and asked everyone who was in charge, which my uncle was. He had his forehead against the cement floor and a barrel in the back of his neck and was told to take them to the cage, which is what we used to call the area with narcotics, pain meds, anxiety meds, all the good stuff. He let them in, and he was pushed belly first against the fencing of the cage with a small gun in his back while these guys cleaned us out. They left the way they came in and told everyone on the floor not to move for 20 minutes and set an alarm on my uncle's watch before making him get back on the floor. The whole ordeal took 8 minutes total. We were from a small town in Canada where guns are not usually encountered. The 12 men didn't care about cameras and seemed to know exactly where they were going and what they were grabbing, and they spoke French with an accent when everyone from around that town predominantly spoke English. I had to retrieve and file all of our inventory information before the robbery, so the police could figure out exactly what was taken and got to see the CCTV footage from the warehouse. The conclusion was, they were from Montreal, Quebec, and police believed it to be an inside job of sorts. Someone gave them information, a layout, a list of supplies needed, and what to take. That, or they had done this before, as a pharmaceutical warehouse in New Brunswick was attacked in almost the exact same manner a year before. The company was conveniently sold to a larger Canadian pharmaceutical company 4 months after the event, and both my uncle and I moved on to other occupations. No one was physically hurt, but mentally, absolutely. It was quiet around there afterwards. You could hear the ice machine in the break room across the building, and everything was so tense. Either way, taking the transdermal patches was incredibly intelligent on their behalf. They can keep someone high for quite some time, they are discreet, they have an incredibly long shelf life, and are worth a lot on the street. We lost almost $2 million in estimated street value. Story 56. Chase Bank Mortgage Division uses outdated technology it bought for hundreds of millions of dollars from Quicken/Rocket Mortgage. It's a DOS-based system that Quicken created around 20 years ago. They also purposely handicap their salespeople who work off commissions. To avoid paying out larger commissions if they are doing well, they will be pooled into receiving worse leads or put on special assignments that limit productivity. In worst-case scenarios, when a salesperson finds a way to break the system and make more money than Chase planned to pay out, they dig through the employees' chats or personal files to find reasons to terminate them. Chase also promotes internally to inflate their number of higher-level positions held by minorities. Sounds great on the surface, but they do so artificially. Typically, positions are filled by recruiting or HR, but whenever they want to bump the numbers, they open a position that only inclusion candidates can apply for. Inclusion candidates are code for non-white or non-disabled. These positions are usually for low-level management that is planned to be cut in the near future. They also give blatant preferential treatment to employees with children to avoid lawsuits. They lost a big one a few years back over fathers getting equal maternity leave time. Story 57. I'm a Red Seal machinist/Red Seal millwright, have a C ticket in welding, and am a mechanical engineer. I was approached by a company claiming to work for the military to design and make a bunch of prototype small hydraulic cylinders that would be used in a military weapon that essentially reminded me of a destroyer droid from Star Wars, the ones that would roll around. I think it would fire an incredibly long-range shot, then would immediately reposition itself before firing again so people could not find where it was coming from. I never actually got to see any drawings or prints, only the sizing of the hydraulics I had to create and the exact stroke, extend, and retract length they needed to be. My entire shop was placed under a strict NDA, and we had to put signs and fences all over our shop, and customers were not even allowed to walk in. We had to conduct all of our business in the hallway or outside. It was a bit awkward. Anyway, we weren't allowed to talk about it for 3 years after the fact. This was like 8 years ago now. Story 58. Never thought I'd get to share this, but 2 other colleagues and myself were assigned to a hush-hush project funded by the Department of Defense when I was employed at a Harvard Medical School research lab in 2010. We were given an Ebola virus cell membrane sample, tasked with elucidating its lipid profile within the week. Afterwards, all of our analysis, notebooks, thumb drives, and raw data were collected, never to be brought up again. We resumed our work like nothing ever happened. From my understanding, there were 2 other labs in the country that were tasked with elucidating the carbohydrate profile and the protein profile from their samples. I didn't have to sign an NDA, but our boss did, and he told us to keep it a secret. 2 Ebola pandemics later, and I'm convinced the US military was involved behind the scenes somehow. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a secret American government program that caused the Ebola outbreaks. They probably just saw the writing on the wall and were trying to get ahead of it before it became a huge problem. Story 59. If you are ever with an elderly loved one and they get a Medicare call, hang up right away. I worked at a company in downtown Chicago this last year that were absolute slimeballs. All these young agents scamming old people, promising something about this new upgrade to their insurance when really they were just taking them off their plan. A lot of these people have Alzheimer's disease, and we'd get their family calling in, saying that we took their mother, father, aunt, and so on, off a plan, and now they can't get back on their plan for an entire year. I finally quit because it was so horrific what we had to do to our elders to get a paycheck. I personally tried to do everything I could to not be slimy, but at the end of the day, the whole job was messed up. I took a man off his plan and was going to have him start a new one the following month. He didn't have his medication list on him, so told me he would email it to me. He finally emails me a list of it. Least 20 medications. One of his medications that was covered for like $20 on his plan would literally go up thousands of dollars on the plan I put him on. I called him back and spent 2 hours canceling what we had signed him up on. I still feel horrible to this day. Imagine if he forgot to send me that list of medication. Story 60. My old company I sold mattresses for are still the most overpriced places ever, and heavily rely on having their own exclusive beds, so they can't price match. I've sold one for nearly half price, and still made decent commission. Also, the exclusive beds they sell are exactly the same as the ones in other places, but maybe just rearranged the foam cushions or just got them in different colors and that's it. But they'll be priced an extra few $100. We were told that Tempur-Pedic messed up and that's why they dropped them as a vendor, when in reality the company made demands and Tempur-Pedic refused to screw over their other customers and dropped the contract. We sold clearance beds. We had to say they were overstocks, floor models that never made it to the floors, rejected deliveries. The truth is, a handful were floor models, but 95% of them were returns that people slept on for a minimum of 30 days. And no, they were never cleaned. Just sprayed with what's essentially an industrial version of a knockoff Lysol with reduced scent, so it's not obvious. I don't know how they haven't gotten caught by the health department yet. And finally, if you go to a mattress place for a new bed, don't go for anything priced less than $1,000. They're crap. Instead, find a $1,200 one and haggle them down to about $700 or $800. Story 61. I'm still under the NDA, but don't care because of how stupid and annoying it was. A few well-dressed people came to my place of work, saying they were representatives of a very important celebrity who wanted to come visit and make use of a large and visually distinct space on the property. We asked who it was, when they would be arriving, what they'd need, and how long they intended to stay. They could or would not tell our people, and only wanted to know if they could secure the room starting at 3 p.m. People higher on the ladder than me responsible for making these decisions eventually agreed, and literally every employee was made to sign an NDA and told that when the celebrity arrived, we were not to speak to them or even look at them if we could help it. If we happened to find ourselves walking in the same hallway, we were either to stop and face the wall or duck into any nearby doorways and practically be invisible. The waiting began, and so did the rumors of who it was, who could possibly wield such power. 3 p.m. passed. By 7 p.m., they still had not showed up, although their representatives continued to assure us they were on the way. The place had closed to the public by then, and most non-essential employees had gone home. I was one of the ones who had to stay because of my position and what I'm responsible for there. By 10 p.m., they still had not arrived, and my coworkers and I were pissed beyond belief. Our respective department heads told us if anyone wanted to leave, they could. I did. Turns out, the big important celebrity did finally arrive around 11:30 at night. Drumroll, please. It was Beyoncé's sister. She evidently came, took a few photographs, and contact information was exchanged between her people and ours about the possibility of her coming back to shoot a music video there. That did eventually happen, I believe, although our building was only visible in 1 or 2 scenes.